Am I audible, Sharwani?
Yes, sir, it is audible.
Okay, thank
Audible,
you.
sir.
Yeah. So good morning, all the participants. We are into the final day of our FDP on quantum computing algorithms and machine learning. So today we will be coming up with the following sessions with a small change in the schedule due to other official commitments locally, and also to help you all to face the test and all. We thought of keeping the afternoon free. So the first session is from Dr. Meenal Moharir, Associate Professor, Department of CS at RVCE on SVM and Quantum SVM. With her students also will be participating. I welcome them all along with Meenal. Following Meenal's session is a session from our principal, Dr. K.N. Subramania, on the national education policy, how that can be leveraged for imparting 21st century skills in engineering students. Quite useful information for all of us at this particular instance of time when the country is moving towards the new education policy. So we are taking a small break after the first session and resuming later. Immediately after the session by principal, we'll be proceeding towards the valedictory of the program. And of course, I'm not going to show the agenda valedictory as of now. We'll be announcing the test details and duration and all during the time. And also will be the link and all be shared during valedictory session. And I request all of you to present for all the three sessions, and you have in fact helped us to make this FDP a successful FDP. I hope so. So with this background, I would I request Sharwani to introduce Meenal to the audience.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone.
Is the recording started? Is the recording started?
Yes.
Okay.
To introduce about my dearest friend, Dr. Meenal Srinivas Moharir. She is currently working as Associate Professor in Department of Computer Science and Engineering at RV College of Engineering. Her academic qualifications include PhD in Information and Network Security from Avinash Lingam University, Coimbatore, MTech from VTU in Computer Network Engineering, and BE in Computer Science and Engineering from GECA, Maharashtra. Her 20 years of experience include teaching, training, and research. The professional expertise include computer networks, data communication, information security, wireless sensor networks, IoTs, machine learning, high performance computing, and GPU computing. She is research supervisor of 6 scholars who are pursuing doctoral program in computer networks, high performance computing, and machine learning. She has executed and executing many research projects and consultancy works funded by government and private funding agencies. She has published many technical papers, to be precise, more than 40 in national and international journals and conferences. Dr. Meenal is coordinator for NVIDIA GPU and Research Center at RVCE. She has received Best White Paper Award at Nokia India in year 2019. She has received hardware research grant from NVIDIA worth 15 lakhs. Currently, she is working as PI for R&D project from CAIR DRDO worth 10 lakhs. We are really privileged to have you here, Meenal. I owe to you, and I hope my audience will be benefited by your talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharwani, for your kind introduction. I will share my screen. Okay, hope my screen is visible.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm making it full screen. Okay. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. So I will be talking on SVM and quantum SVM. So as Sharwani gave introduction, I have started this quantum computing basically from last 3 to 4 months, and I should say thanks to Satish Babu sir, because he brought us, myself and Sharwani, in this quantum computing field. So thank you so much, sir, and yeah, it is really interesting. And I can assure you, you can start it anytime, and there are lots of interested things to do in quantum computing. Okay, so let us start today's presentation. So this is the agenda for my presentation. I will be covering basics of SVM with some visual introduction. Then I will be talking on one example, the step-by-step walk through the code I will be doing. Then I will be talking about some additional complexities of SVM in terms of 4 parameters, higher dimension, C parameter, multiple classes, kernel tree, etc. Then later I will be talking about quantum SVM. So how our classical SVM, we can deploy it in quantum environment. So what are the steps and how the deployment is done. Later we will be talking on the case study. So we have taken some data set from Kaggle about the mental health of the tech chief. And we will be executing the classical SVM on this data set. Then we will be executing quantum SVM using Qiskit on this data set. And later, this quantum SVM will be executing on IBM quantum hardware also. And to demonstrate this case study, 2 of my students, Mr. Raghav Rawat and Syed Farhan, will be joining for this presentation. And finally, I will be talking about the applications of SVM and quantum SVM. Okay. So let us start today's session. So what is support vector machine? So support vector machine is a supervised machine learning algorithm that can be employed for both classification as well as regression purpose. But commonly SVM is used for classification purpose. Okay, so you can see here the right side, there's an image. So once you understand SVM clearly, you can correlate with this image, why this image is here when we are talking about SVM. So let us understand what is SVM first. So let us see, you can see some dots on the screen. Okay, and if I ask you to classify these dots into, if I ask you to separate this dot as blue dots and green dots separately. So in other words, if I ask you to split this data, which are in the 2 classes, one is blue class and another is green class. So probably you can classify it or separate it with a straight line like this, or you may split it like this, or you may split it like this. So there are different ways how we can split this particular data. Okay, but if I ask separate the data best possible way, okay, so what will be the best possible way? So apart from those 3, whatever the approximate line we have drawn, we can say this is the best possible way, okay, which is separating these blue dots and green dots. So why it is best possible way? Definitely the question will be there. So here, that's what centrally the SVM means. So SVM, basically it gives you optimal solution to differentiate 2 classes. So in this case, we are using SVM to separate this blue area and this green area. And this is an optimal solution. Okay, so why it is optimal solution and why it is best possible way, let us discuss. Okay, so why we are calling it as a best split? So if I say this is one central divider, which is dividing this particular plane, okay, and I have another 2 lane across this center line, okay. And I can say this is the widest way which is separating these two groups. Okay, so this is the widest way or widest road or widest path which is separating these two groups. Okay, and that's why I'm calling this particular path as a best possible solution. Okay, so if we recall, what are the other solution we discussed to separate these two classes, that is red dot and green dot. So this was one line we had drawn initially. And if we check out whether it is the widest path, no, it is not as widest as whatever the solution we have seen in the previous slide. Then we have seen one more solution. This is again not as widest as whatever we have seen as a best solution for the separation. So this is particular thing which is giving you the widest margin or widest path or widest road which is separating these two groups. And that's why I can call it as a best solution. Okay, so let us talk in more technical terminologies here. So this is the widest road that separates these two groups. So instead of saying the road, now I will use a technical term. So I can say this is the widest margin that separates these two groups. Okay, so this is the widest margin. And the distance between these points and the line are as possible. Okay, so why we are calling it as a widest margin? Because the distance between the points, these points and the line is as far as possible, and that's why we are calling it as a widest margin. Okay, so these points, now the distance between the points. Okay, so what are these points which are touching to this dotted line? Okay, the line at the lane at the left side and the lane at the right side of the divider. Okay, so the points which are touching to this dotted line. Okay, now again we will use some technical term to represent this point, and these points we will call as a support vector. So now I represented these dots which are touching to this dotted line in some orange color. Okay, and we can call this as a support vector. Okay, so the distance between the support vector and the line are as far as possible. You can see here the widest margin is there. Okay, so now again one more terminology here we will use. So now we will say the distance between the support vector and the hyperplane. So whatever this line we have drawn as a divider, we will call it as a hyperplane. No, as I told you, we are talking now more technically in more SVM terminologies. Okay, so we can call it as a hyperplane. So your hyperplane is separating these dots with widest possible margin. Okay, so that's what here is summarized in this particular slide. So what we are doing, we are splitting the data in the best possible way. Okay, so we are drawing a hyperplane to separate this data as a straight line is your hyperplane. And the hyperplane best splits the data because it is as far as possible from the support vectors. Okay, so this hyperplane or whatever this line we have drawn, okay, it is the best solution. Why? Because it is as far as possible from the support vector. What is support vector? The dots which are touching to this side line, that is your dotted line. Okay, and in another word we can say, or in another way we can say, we have maximized the margin. Okay, so we have formed here the widest road, or we have formed here the widest margin, and that's why we can call it as a best solution. Okay, and that's what your support vector machine does. It will separate your classes, okay, the different classes in widest possible way. Okay, so how do we can maximize this margin? So your solution, whatever optimized solution, whatever you are trying to achieve, we have to maximize the margin. Okay, we have to make that road widest. Okay, so how we can maximize this margin? So this particular problem is called as constraint optimization problem. Okay, so what is optimization and what is constraint here? Let us break out these two terms. So here optimization we are doing in terms of margin. We want our margin to be maximum. Okay, so optimization is in terms of margin. And what are the constraint here? So our constraint is whatever these dots are there, it should not on this road. It should not on this margin. They should be away from the margin, or they should be as far as possible from the margin. Okay, and that is our constraint. Okay, and that's why we can call this problem as a constraint optimization problem. Okay, so we can solve this constraint optimization problem using Lagrange multiplier technique, which involves a lot of algebra or lots of math here. But here I tried to simplify this thing in one single slide. So let us see. So we understood now what is hyperplane, which is dividing your classes. Okay, so hyperplane is always n-1 dimensional subspace for an n-dimensional space. So your hyperplane is always n-1 if your data is n-dimensional. For example, for 2-dimensional space, the hyperplane will be in 1 dimension, which is just a straight line. For 3-dimension space, the hyperplane will be 2 dimension, which is a plane or a slice of cube. Okay, and hyperplane can be mathematically written with this particular equation. Okay, for 2-dimensional space, the hyperplane is a line, and it is an equation of line. Okay, and how we do the classification? So simple, we will use the equation of line. So the dots above the lines, okay, that is the coordinates x1, x2, which satisfy this particular formula. Okay, we will call as a one type of class, and which is not satisfying this formula or which is less than 0, we are making one class, which is greater than 0, we are making another class, and we can basically solve this classification problem. Okay, so this is very simplified example I have given. With straight line, you are classifying your data. Okay, and with straight line, this is the equation we are using. So the data above the straight line is belong to one class, and data below the line belong to the another class. Okay, so next thing, let us apply it this particular discussion to the real world problem. Okay, so this is some baking atoms we can see on the screen, and that is one of my passion. In this pandemic, lots of extra things all of us we have done, and one of the things whatever I did, it was a baking. Okay, and these are the few things generally we bake: cakes, muffin, cupcakes, and so on. Okay, so here I want to concentrate on cupcakes. Okay, so in my house there is always argument between my son and myself. He says cupcake and muffins are same. Okay, so there is always argument between cupcake versus muffin. So he says a cupcake is just a muffin with some frosting, and muffin is just a cupcake with some random bit stuff in, like nuts or some chocolate chips, etc. Okay, but I, being a baker, or I am having a experience in baking, and I know how to make cupcakes and how to make muffin. I always say no, these two are totally different. They are inherently different. Whatever the content or whatever the ingredients comes inside, it is totally different. Okay, and that's what I will always say. Cupcake and muffin are not same. They are inherently different. With my experience, I can definitely tell this. So what I did, I tried to challenge myself, and I want to develop a model, machine learning model using SVM, which will classify this recipe. If I input a recipe, it should tell me whether it is a cupcake recipe or a muffin recipe. So what is the challenge? Classify the recipe as cupcake or muffins, and when a new recipe comes in, the model should determine, or model should predict whether it is cupcake or whether it is muffin. So this is the problem statement. So I want to solve this problem statement with 3 steps. Okay, so first thing, I should create my data set. I should find the data. Second thing, I should apply this data to the data science model. Okay, I should model this data using some machine learning model or machine learning technique, and finally review the results. Okay, so basically the problem statement is to classify muffins and cupcakes. Okay, so let us start with the first step, that is find data. So to generate the data set or to find the data, what I did, I Googled some basic recipes of muffin and basic recipes of cupcakes. Okay, and surprisingly, I noticed that both of these recipes for the muffin or for the cupcake, it uses same number of ingredients. Okay, so what I did, I tried to find the basic recipe for cupcake. I found some 10 recipes for the cupcake and 10 recipes for the muffins. Okay, top 10 recipes for the cupcakes and top 10 recipes for the muffins. Okay, and then what I did, I just listed out, and surprisingly, what I noticed basically, both the cupcake recipe and the muffin recipe have total 8 ingredients. Okay, and all these 10 recipes are different. There are no duplication in those total 20 recipes basically. Okay, so you can see here my data set. So I have used muffin 1, muffin 2, muffin 3 up to muffin 10, and cupcake 1 up to cupcake 10. And what are the contents required, I have listed out in this table. Okay, so when I was analyzing this particular data, one problem came, and I noticed that particular problem. Each recipe yields different amount of batter. Okay, so for example, muffin 1 recipe, it uses 2 cups of water, 2 cups of flour, 1/2 cup of sugar. Another same muffin recipe uses 4 cups of water, 4 cups of flour, and maybe 2 cups of sugar, and so on. So there is a whatever the quantity we are generating from the recipe, it is quite different from each other. And if I feed this model, or if I feed this basically data set, or if I input this data set to my machine learning model, definitely it will classify this, though it is same muffin recipe, still it will classify in 2 different classes. Okay, so what I did, I normalized my data. Okay, so instead of using amount base, what I did, I converted my data into percent base. Okay, so whatever muffin 1 recipe was telling me use 2 cups of flour and 1/2 cup of sugar, what I did, I converted into percent base, and I said, I should use 47% of flour and 24% of sugar. For cupcake 1, I should use 42% of flour and 21% of sugar, and so on. So basically, I did a normalization, and in the normalization, I convert my amount based data into percent based data. Okay, so this is the normalization steps. Then once after doing the normalization, this is how my data set look like. So these are the 10 muffin recipes and 10 cupcake recipes, and these are the content of those individual recipe. So what else? And again, these contents are in the form of percentage. So 55% flour, 28% of milk, 3% of sugar, 7% of butter, egg, and so on. So if you do the total of all these things, it will be 100%. Okay, so this is how I normalize my data set, and my data sets are ready now. So first step I completed here, generation of the data set. Okay, so now the next step I should go, and that is apply a data science model. Okay, so here the data science model I will be using the support vector machine. Okay, and to implement this data science model, I have used the Python script. Okay, and this Python script I have divided into again some 6 steps. Okay, I will be discussing each of these step in detail. Okay, so first step is import libraries. So hope many of you will be aware of the Python and machine learning concept. So these are the libraries we should import. So for the analysis purpose, I have imported pandas, numpy, and scikit-learn. And from scikit-learn, basically, I have imported SVM, okay, which I want to use as a classifier for my data classification. And then for visualization, I use matplotlib. And to look my data more good, I have used Seaborn library. So these are the libraries, whatever I have been used, or what are the libraries I have imported. That is the first step. Then second step is importing the data. So before applying my data to any machine learning model, first I have to read that data, and that data is read using a read CSV function, which is available in Panda library. Okay, so this particular, once I use this read CSV function on my data set, this is how my data look like in the Jupyter Notebook screenshot. Okay, so that is the second step, imported data. Then before applying the machine learning model, I always like to visualize my data. Okay, so in this case, whatever the recipe we have taken, it was containing a total 8 ingredients. Okay, but after observing the data, I notice sugar and butter are the two important ingredients in these two recipes, which are very important to, or which plays important role to classify muffin and the cupcakes. Okay, and that's why I have plotted these two ingredients or two parameters, sugar and butter here. Okay, and you can see here the visualization after plotting. This red dot shows the muffin, and the use of sugar and butter is very less in muffin, whereas in cupcake the use of sugar and butter, it is quite a lot. Okay, and that's why this is a very good candidate for your SVM classification. Okay, there is a quite good separation for these two ingredients. With visualization we can make out. Okay, so this is about the data preparation step. Then next thing is we have to fit the model. Okay, so for fitting the model, again, as I told you, we are taking these two ingredients as input, that is sugar and butter. Okay, and then what we are doing, we are using SVM, and in that SVM we have to use a function SVC. Okay, so it is support vector classifier. Okay, there is SVR also, that is support vector regression, which is used for regression purpose. But here, as we are doing the classification, we have used SVC. Okay, and one more thing, we have used the kernel equal to linear here. Okay, so in our further discussion, basically we are going to discuss in detail about the kernel, but here just to understand, we have used kernel for the basic case. The kernel equal to linear is sufficient. Okay, and we have inputted this butter and sugar as a 2 input parameter to our model. Okay, and we can see here some output also. Okay, but with this output we can't make out anything, so let us visualize this output. So for visualization, these are the steps. So here how this hyperplane is drawn, and how those dotted lines are drawn, all those things are there here. And let us visualize this. So this is our SVM model, okay, which is classifying this muffin and cupcakes recipe. Okay, so these red dots are my muffin recipes, and these blue dots are the cupcakes recipe. So it is successfully, your SVM model is successfully classifying the recipes. There is no misclassification is happening. And this is the dotted margin also I have drawn with the code, and it is visualized here. Okay, so you can see here this is a quite efficient model because it is generating a quite wide margin. Okay, and that's how we have classified our muffin and cupcakes. Okay, so we have finished this apply data science model step, that is second step. Now the next thing is review the result. Okay, so next step is review the result. So what was our challenge? We wanted to classify the muffin recipe and the cupcake recipe. Okay. And if we are inputting some new recipe, our model should identify or our model should determine whether it is cupcake or muffin. Okay. So here, if I'm inputting some new parameter or a new recipe, my model should tell me whether it should go to the left side of the line or it should go to the right side of the line. Okay. So you can see here what I did. I have added one additional point. You can see this yellow dot here. Okay. And this yellow dot, basically it is a muffin recipe. And that's why you can see here the other side of the line with near to the red dot. Okay. So I wanted, so visually you can make out whether it is a muffin or a cupcake. Okay. So we can see it is this side of the line. So I can say it is a muffin recipe, but I want my model should predict this whether this recipe is cupcake or muffin if I input the new recipe. Okay. So to do this, what I did, I have used a function called as predict new. Okay. Which is predicting whether the inputted recipe is muffin or a cupcake. So what we have to give input or as a parameter to this particular function, the quantity of butter and quantity of sugar. So in this case, we have used 50% of butter and 20% of sugar. So that's why it is going above the line and it is saying it is muffin recipe. In another example, I have given 40% of butter and 20% of sugar. It is plotting this point below the line and that's why it is a cupcake recipe. Okay, so our model not only classifying the available data points into muffin and cupcake class, but also if I'm inputting any new recipe, okay, it is classifying whether that new recipe belongs to the muffin class or cupcake class. Okay, so this is about the prediction. So we can conclude from here, cupcakes and muffins are not same. Okay, they are two separate classes or two separate food items basically. Okay, and we can classify muffin and cupcakes using support vector machine. Okay, so this is how the entire example about the support vector machine to classify two separate classes and predicting the new class also whether it belongs to the specific class or not. Okay, so this is how we have covered the basics about SVM. Okay, hope all of you are able to understand this, whatever the basic discussion we have did till now. Okay, so let us continue our discussion how to make SVM more powerful. Okay, so you can see here some diagrams. So the first diagram, it is a simple thing, whatever we have seen in the previous example. Okay, we have a two-dimensional data. Okay, and we have separated that data using a simple one-dimensional hyperplane, that is your straight line. Okay, because for the previous example, we have taken two ingredients as input. Okay, and that's why our data was in two-dimensional place. But if I want to add one more one more input item, suppose with butter, sugar, and flour, also as I want to add as a third input item. Okay, then my data will be converted into 3 dimension, and you can see here some green dots. Okay, and when I want to separate this, I have to use two-dimensional plane. Okay, so here this cube is separating this particular data. Okay, this plane is separating this particular data. Okay, and when I am taking more than 3 parameters, okay, as an input to classify my data, okay, I have to use hyperplane to separate or to classify that particular data. Okay, so definitely this looks a little bit difficult to visualize, but believe me, it is very easy to code. Okay, so what we can do in the previous example, the same code, sorry. So in the previous example, what we have done for our SVM model, we have inputted two parameters, that is sugar and butter. Now, instead of this two parameter, I want to input all 8 ingredients, all 8 ingredient as an input. Okay, so no, this was the input in the initial case, whatever we have seen earlier or whatever we have discussed earlier. But now what I want to do, I want to input all 8 parameters to my SVM model. Okay, so my problem set will become multidimensional here. And why we want this multidimensional? It will be useful to optimize your hyperplane. Okay, it will be useful to maximize that margin so that your classification will be better and better. If new data items are coming in, it will properly classify it in a specific class. Okay, so why we have to go to the higher dimension? To make our margin or to make our hyperplane more and more optimized. Okay, so this is about the higher dimension. Then next thing is C parameter. Okay, so what is this C parameter? Let us discuss here. So this was the initial data points we have discussed, and we have classified these data points. So we have classified these data points by a straight line. Okay, but this was not the actual data points, whatever I got. I hid one data points here, initial case, and you can see here, this was the original data actually. And this was the hidden point, which I was not shown in the initial data. Okay, so you can see this particular data points, which is little bit above, and it is almost near to this blue dots. Okay, and if I ask you now to classify this data, what will happen? Again, we will use this straight line. Okay, and we'll try to classify this data. But if we use this straight line to classify the data now, what is happening? Misclassification is happening. Though this is a red dot, though it is belonging to the muffin category, it is getting classified as a cupcake category. And that's where your C parameter comes into picture. So what is this C parameter? The C parameter allows you to decide how much you want to penalize misclassified point. Okay, for example, where this C parameter we have used in the code, let us see. So when we executed this particular code, if you remember, we got this particular output. Okay, and in this output, you can see here C equal to 1. So by default, the C value will be 1, but you can vary this value for getting a optimal hyperplane. Okay, and which will allow you to do more misclassification, or you can keep your model simplified and allow some misclassification and so on. So that is given in the next slide. So here we can see the 2 code samples. So in the first sample, we have used the kernel linear, and the C parameter we have used some power of -2. Okay, and in the second case, we have used C parameter in power of plus actually. Okay, so here we have used minus power for your C parameter, and here we have used basically the plus power for your C parameter. And if I plot the data points with this as a setting as an input, what will happen? In this particular case, some misclassification is happening. In the other case, there is no misclassification. So in the first case, basically, we are prioritizing the simplicity. We want to make our model simplified. Okay. So though it is doing misclassification, we are okay, but we don't want to create any complexity here. And that's why this particular hyperplane is also called as soft margin here, because it is doing some misclassification also. But in the other case, we are prioritizing making few mistakes. Okay, we don't want to do mistakes like whatever happening here. We want to prioritize making few mistakes. So here very less mistake or mistakes are not there basically in this particular example where C is positive. Okay, but I can say this particular model is a little bit overfitting. Okay, you can see here this line or hyperplane, whatever we have drawn, it is almost touching to these blue dots. Okay, and if any new recipe is coming in, definitely it may get misclassified. Okay, because the margin with your support vector, it's very less. Okay, and almost it is touching to your hyperplane, and that's why definitely it is not a optimal plane. So while selecting this C parameter, you have to do some trial and error, and depending on your application, you have to decide the exact value of this C parameter. Okay. Then one more thing I would like to discuss here, that is about multiple classes. So here your SVM, one of the interesting thing about SVM is it is not only used to classify two classes, you can classify multiple classes also using SVM. And you can see here some red dots, blue dots, and some green dots also added. So here I added one more recipe of spoon. So this is how spoon looks like if you don't know. Okay. So here we are basically now classifying 3 recipe instead of 2 recipe in our initial example. Okay. So your SVM model support this classification also. And in code, how you will do this classification. So when we are classifying it, the visualization will be like this. So this blue thing is your muffin, the red is your cupcakes, and this green thing is now spoons. Okay, so in the code, how we will reflect this? So we can reflect this by specifying a particular flag here, that is decision function shape is equal to OVR. Okay, so which will allows your SVM to classify your model in more than 2 classes also. So how this OVR, or what is this OVR? It is one versus rest. What will do? It will verify the one class with all other available classes, and it will try to classify it. Then it will go to the next class, and it will try to classify, or it will compare that class with the other classes. Okay. So here we have classified blue class, red class, and the remaining was the green class. So that's what it is called as one versus rest, OVR. Right? So you can set this OVR parameter here after the kernel linear, you can say comma, decision function shape is equal to OVR. So which will allow the multiple classes classification also. Then the next important thing is about the kernel. No SVM discussion will end without this kernel trick discussion. Okay, so here you can see some data points. Okay, and if I ask you to classify these data points, okay, how you will do it? So we have seen that straight line approach. Okay, draw the line and try to classify above the line and below the line, different classes. But in this case, definitely it is not working. So we can do this classification in SVM using kernel trick. So what is this kernel trick? What it will do? It will convert your original data into some higher dimension. So you can visualize this was the original data, and here this data is converted into higher dimension. The z-axis is added here, and now you can see here we can separate this data using this plane. Okay, so the dots above the plane belongs to the one class, and dot below the plane belongs to the another class. And this is possible. The conversion of original data to higher dimension is possible with the help of this kernel trick. Okay, so there are different types of kernels supported in SVM, like linear, which we have used in our basic example. Apart from that, it also supports radial basis function, which is widely used. Then polynomial and sigmoid kernels are supported in SVM. Okay, so once we convert, so here we have converted our original data into higher dimensions, and whatever this hyperplane we got, if we convert this hyperplane from 3D again to 2D, okay, this is how our original data will look like now. So it is nothing but the circle, and we can use the equation of circle to classify the dot. So the points which are inside the circle belongs to the one class, and points which are outside the circle may belong to the another class. So this is how your kernel trick works. So in the code, how you will specify the type of kernel. So if you remember in our original discussion, we said kernel is equal to linear, where we have used this SVC function. Okay. So here, when you are linear kernel, you will just mention the type of the kernel. Okay. But now in updated code, we can mention the different types of kernel, whatever we have seen in the previous slide. So we are mentioning here the type of the kernel is RBF. Okay. And here we are using C parameter as 1. And when we are specifying these other types of kernel, we have to use another parameter, that is gamma parameter. So C parameter we have already discussed. Now what is this gamma parameter? So you can see here a few graphs again. So here is the first diagram is with the linear kernel, and C value is 1. And we are classifying muffin, cupcakes, and spoon, the 3 categories. And in the another diagram, that is the next diagram, the kernel is of type RBF, and C value is same for both the diagrams. Okay. Here, this kernel was linear, but for other 2 diagram, the kernel is RBF. The C value is also same, but the gamma value is different. Okay, so again here we have used the gamma to the power of some negative value, and here in this case the gamma we have used 2 to the power of some positive value. Okay, so if you use this negative value, that is small gamma, it is less complexity, but still it is doing some misclassification. But if you use the large value of gamma 2 to the power of some positive number, so large gamma, so in that case it will be more complex, and you can see here everything it is classified as red. Red is what your cupcake basically. Okay, blue is muffin, or red is cupcake, and this green is spoon. But now it is classifying everything as red. So it is doing a misclassification here. So whatever the value of gamma, again you have to choose carefully. You have to do multiple trial and error, and you have to check out which value of C and which value of gamma will give you the best solution. Okay, so the next thing, when we should use SVM. So SVM is good when we are dealing with the high dimensional data. Okay, we have a kernel trick which will handle this high dimensional data easily, and in the code just the type of kernel you have to mention. Then this particular type of model, that is SVM, will work well for the small data. So in our example, whatever this classification we have done for the cupcake and muffins, we had small data items or data sets, and it was working quite well. It was predicting it accurately. And then what are the disadvantages? The picking the right kernel and parameter can be computationally intensive. So we have seen the value of C and value of gamma plays important role. Okay. So when you are using some 10 value of gamma and 10 value of C and verifying your model, every time it will computationally become very intensive. And that's what support vector machine is not good choice for that particular purpose. Okay. So this was about the basic SVM or classical SVM. Okay, so SVM is basically a supervised learning technique where we are inputting a label data, and it is used to classify the data in 2 different classes. Okay, and that is done using something called as hyperplane. That straight line is called as hyperplane, and we have to make that hyperplane optimal, means the margin between the dots, it should be maximum. Okay, so that was the discussion about support vector machine, basic or classical SVM. Okay, now let us move to the next point of our presentation, that is quantum SVM. So quantum SVM we are going to discuss here. So quantum computing, you are hearing about the quantum computing from last 4 days, and definitely you would have discussed the various basic about the quantum computing, and you would have heard about the basic characteristics of quantum computing, that is superposition and entanglement. And these characteristics are very, very important. So superposition means, so your classical bits always represent in zeros or one. Okay, so at a time, at a particular instant of time, the value of your classical data or a bit value might be 0 or 1. Okay, but your qubits or quantum bits, okay, you can represent your data, means in your classical bit, the data can be either 0 or 1, but in quantum bits, at a time, your bit can be 0 and 1 at your bit is 0 and 1 at a time, basically. Okay, so that spinning the coin or throwing the coin in the air, all those examples you would have heard in this last 3 days to make out how at a time your qubit is showing the value of 0 as well as 1. But this particular phenomenon or this particular characteristics is very, very important to create a huge competition space. Okay, then another property of your quantum computing is entanglement. So the state of entangled qubits can be described independently, cannot be described independently of each other. Okay, so if I have two qubits and if they are entangled, means if I know the state of one bit, I can predict the state of the another bit. That is called as your entanglement, and that's what it shows here in the diagram with the gates also. Okay, so now as I told you, we are discussing here quantum SVM, and we are demonstrating you one case study where this quantum SVM we are going to use for some data set. Okay, so basically what are these two phenomena or two properties we have discussed? So this entanglement, where we can predict the state of the other qubit which is entangled with your first bit, or so this is basically very useful for the prediction. And these two properties, that is entanglement and superposition, we are taking the advantage of this qubit over classical computing for modeling the real world application. Okay, but while implementing this, the challenge is the quantum embedding, the selection, the choice of the quantum embedding, and the use of functionally correct quantum variational circuit. So what is it? So it is this quantum embedding means converting your classical data to the quantum space data. Okay, so if you have a classical data is XX and you want to translate it into the quantum circuit. Okay, so something like this. This was my original data or classical data, and once it is converted into quantum space with this, the data will be with the bracket notation. You would have heard about this. Okay, and conversion of this classical data to the quantum space is very crucial part in designing the quantum algorithm, which will affect the computational power. Okay, so about this space conversion here. So we have seen in the SVM also, we have seen in the SVM also when our data points were jumbled and we were not able to classify it using simple straight line. What we have to do, we have to convert these data points into higher dimension. Okay, so formally we can let X be the set of input data, and a future map function phi is a function that acts, which will convert your X input into future map F. Okay, so you can see diagrammatically, this is my original data, this phi function, it is converting it into higher dimension. So the same thing we have done in the SVM also. So here now in quantum computing, what we are doing, we are converting our original data into quantum space. Okay, so this is happening using this quantum circuitry and all, and we have used here variational circuit, which is a parameterized function kind of thing, where we can input different data items, and at a time it will convert it into quantum space with some unitary transformation function. Okay. So here in this particular case study, basically, we are modeling the quantum SVM on a noisy quantum architecture. Actually, you would have heard in these 5 days, whatever the quantum architecture till now developed, it is containing lots of noise, but still we can use this in the near future to model the real world problem. It is giving quite better performance. So with case study, we will demonstrate you. And in this case study, we have used the mental health data. This is from the Kaggle. We got this data. It is having 1,260 data points collected from 10 different countries. And these are the steps we will be following to convert our classical SVM to quantum SVM. So first is whatever the data input is there. It is labeled input. We are converting into quantum feature space using specific quantum embedding. Okay, and then we are generating the hyperplane. We are optimizing that hyperplane, and every time we are revising the parameters. So that's what it is happening. The repetition of steps 2 to 6. So I will request Raghav and Farhan to demonstrate this step with this the detailed methodology diagram as well as with the code. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes, am I audible now? Let me quickly pull
Yes,
up
so
my
Raghav
slides.
and Farhan are here. I will give my credentials to. So Farhan will be sharing screen, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Farhan, you can share the screen now.
Will you please confirm if the screen is visible?
Yes, your screen is visible. You can carry.
Okay. So let me quickly go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Syed Farhan from Electronics and Communications Engineering Department at RV College of Engineering. I'm also a part-time research intern at University of California, Los Angeles, where my research is about robust quantum control techniques in superconducting qubits. Apart from that, I recently transitioned from a software engineering role at JP Morgan to a quantum research intern in the New York office as well. So me and Raghav are actually leading an organization known as Q-Power Research. And this work that we have done is under Q-Power Research and is also associated to RV College of Engineering. Raghav, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Farhan. Good morning, everyone. I am Raghav Rawat. I am also a student at Electronics and Communication Department of RV College of Engineering. I am interning with DRDO in Bangalore, and I'm a part of Q-Power Research, and excited to present the work that we have done.
Thank you, Raghav. Well, I'd like to thank the entire organizing committee of Circuit and also RV College of Engineering for inviting us. It's really an honor to be able to present here. Moving on, let me begin by talking about the aim of this research. So Minal ma'am has covered most of the stuff which has been involved in the research, but I'll just give a brief background and then move into the coding part. So our aim when we started the research was to show that the NISQ era quantum computers, when I say NISQ era, it's nothing but noisy intermediate scale quantum computers, which means quantum computers these days have a lot of noise in them. So the coherence time in quantum computers, specifically in superconducting qubits. So the background which you see is a chip from University of California, SB, and it's a superconducting chip. And basically, the coherence time is in microseconds. So within a few 30 to 40 microsecond window, you have to send your quantum gates and it should perform the operation, or else your quantum state will get destroyed. So you can see how crucial it is to be able to demonstrate the power of quantum computing in NISQ era. And that's what we tried to do in this research. And we tried to apply this to a real world problem. And the real world problems that we tried looking into, we took two different data sets. Of course, the first one was the heart attack data set, again from Kaggle, to predict basically if a person is at high risk or not. The second type of data set, which was the primary data set which we worked on, was the mental health data set in tech workplaces. So let me just give you a brief overview of how the data set looks like. So if you look at the heart attack data set, it takes in lots and lots of parameters. There are a lot of features like the age, cholesterol levels, FBS. There are a lot of different levels that we have taken. In the mental health data set, again, it's from 10 plus countries. Of course, India was not involved in this iteration, but we had United States, UK, Canada, different countries coming in. So age, gender, family history for mental health treatment. Is the person under treatment? How is the work interference happening? And there are different other parameters that have been taken into account to predict if an employee will need mental health attention or not. So moving on, I'll be talking about the VQC architecture very briefly as to how this variational quantum classical architecture actually works. So basically, if I talk about the first step that is involved, we take a classical data set. Let me denote it with this vector X. And what we are basically doing is embedding this classical data set into a quantum computer, right? So the first step of embedding this data set is this orange color box, which you can see here. And we do that with some classical function initially. So this is a classical map, for example, which maps D dimension to Hilbert space. So D dimension is nothing but the dimension of this input vector, right? Now the first step that is involved is basically using an embedding. An embedding, it could be a vector embedding, it could be different types of embeddings, right? And what this embedding actually does is it applies this feature map onto this input classical data, right? And finally, the feature map is based on the input classical data, but it is applied on starting with 0 state of qubits. So let's say if we have 5 different qubits, then basically we will have 5 different initialized states, 0 states. So you will have 0 cross 5 if you have 5 different qubits. You're starting from the 0 state and you're applying certain gates on top of that. That's your embedding, and basically embedding your classical data into the quantum computer, right? So the moment the embedding actually happens, the next step is these unitary gates which you see, which have parameters phi1, phi2, and phi3. So let me denote this entire thing as W of theta, where theta is the set of parameters. So theta is the vector which stores all of these parameters. And basically this is our quantum variational circuit. So what a quantum variational circuit does is it processes the data, basically entangles the data in different ways. We are utilizing the exponential state space of quantum computing to basically harness its power. And so what happens in SVM? We move to a higher dimension to be able to generate a hyperplane which can classify the data into exact classes. So moving to a higher dimension can easily happen if we have exponential state space. And that's exactly why we have this variational circuit, right? So if I write the mathematical form, so it will be W of theta being applied to the state which we had in the first step, right? So W of theta being applied to V of phi of x, which is nothing but our embedding, which is being applied to our initial qubit state, right? And just after that, what we are doing is, so right now we are in the quantum realm, we move to the classical realm using measurements. The moment we move to the classical realm, we have a classical cost function, and this classical cost function will evaluate certain parameters for us. And finally, we have an optimizer which will optimize our weights and biases. And finally, the phi values of these parameters will be fed back to the quantum variational circuit. And that's exactly what's happening over here in the variational quantum computing, quantum classifying, this VQC architecture. So moving on to the coding part, Raghav, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, yes, Farhan. So I'll continue with the code part. that we have implemented for the heart attack dataset here. So in order to actually acknowledge and appreciate the quantum advantage, we need to see how classical SVM is performing on the dataset first. So that is what I'm going to be talking about. So in this code, first of all, we begin with some general imports. So NumPy for array processing. Then we have SciPy, Matplotlib for plotting, sklearn for the pre-processing of the dataset again. And then we begin by creating a function, heart attack, which is basically doing all the pre-processing together. So you can see a CSV being imported. Then we have the train test split further on the pandas data frame, and we see we take all of the features except for the target label, obviously. So and we take that up into 4 different arrays, the NumPy arrays, which are xtrain, xtest, ytrain, ytest, which signify their importance in the upcoming ML pipeline. Then we apply the standard scalar function from the sklearn, which basically transforms our data set in order to better implement the model and for a faster convergence. Then we implement the principal component analysis in order to get the 13-dimensional data that we have into 2 dimensions. So here you can see the n components parameter. We are gonna give it further in the code. We are gonna give the parameter as 2, just to have a 2-dimensional data, which would be even easier to visualize and see the results of the classical SVM. Then further, we apply the min-max scaler, which scales the dataset to the range of -1 to +1. We take some samples from the complete dataset in this line of code. Can you highlight that, Farhan?
Yeah.
Training input, yeah. So that is the part where we take some samples in order to plot them up and just visualize instead of taking the whole dataset. So, and this part is basically responsible for plotting the data as a matplotlib. Then we have the SVM utilities class, where we have one function for making the mesh grid that is important to visualize the support vectors. And then we have the plot counters function, which is using you can say the X and Y values to actually plot the data on the matplotlib plot. So further, we import some more important libraries. One is the Qiskit primarily, that will be further used in order to compare the quantum preprocessing with what we do in the classical algorithm, and then sklearn and others. So we take training data set 20, testing data set, and we do we use the split data set function that we previously introduced, and that is how we get our train data and test data after the pre-processing. And a plot is inherently given here, which is showing some random samples of our out of our data set. So you can see there is a lot of overlap here between the highly likely and not very likely data points. And this is what exactly we are trying to improve with quantum preprocessing in higher dimensional spaces. So for moving ahead with the classical algorithm, we take the SVM linear SVC out of sklearn. So this is inbuilt in the sklearn library. We do model.fit from our data set, and that is how our model is trained exactly. So further, we take the model.score, we take model.predict on our unseen data set, and then we plot it as contours. So here below, yeah. So below you can see the plot of the training set, and to the right is the test set, which signifies a linear boundary that is best bifurcation of the data set in the classical algorithm. So what we try to do here from now is implement a Gaussian kernel and then apply, then comes our quantum preprocessing, which Farhan talked about, quantum embeddings, which Farhan will be continuing from now.
Thanks, Raghav. So you can see that one important part is that the accuracy on the training set is very low. So the aim of this research is not to increase the accuracy on the classical part, but to try to match the accuracy for both the classical and quantum. In this case, you can see that 13 different features have been combined together, have been compressed together into just 2 dimensions, right, using the PCA transform. And this could be one of the reasons why we are having a low accuracy. But anyway, let's move on and let's try to apply the Gaussian kernel, right? So the moment we apply the Gaussian kernel, you will be able to see that the accuracy just boosts up, right? So accuracy boosts up to 0.75. So what the Gaussian kernel does, it's not a linear kernel, but it moves to a higher dimension, does some processing, and then basically tries to classify the data. So we are moving to a higher dimension, doing the classification, coming down to a lower dimension. Effectively, there are 3 different steps involved, right? And once we are moving to a higher dimension, if we are able to encode this process into a quantum computer, into qubits, and if the qubits can do the processing in the higher dimension, and automatically the moment we make measurements, what we're doing is moving from a higher to a lower dimension, then our task will be much more simplified. Because if you take the example of classical systems, they solve exponential problems in a much larger time compared to polynomial problems. And what a quantum computer is effectively doing is converting your exponential problem into a problem that can be solved in polynomial time, right? So moving on, we will be talking about the first step, which is the feature map. So if you had a look in this presentation earlier, the first step was to prepare the quantum data set, right? The orange color boxes which you see, V1, V2, and V3. And that's what we're doing here. We have a feature map and we're applying it on our initial state 0, right? So we define a feature map. In our case, we are taking the ZZ feature map. I will not be talking about what the ZZ feature map is in detail, but you can look it up on qiskit.circuit.library. It's easily available online in the Qiskit documentation. There are a lot of other feature maps available. There's the only Z feature map. There are different poly feature maps available. So depending on what kind of math function is being used for encoding the data, we have different kinds of feature maps. And in this case, we have used a feature dimension of 2 because, of course, we have crunched our 13-dimensional data into 2 dimensions, right? So moving ahead to simplify things, we have used the QSVM library, basically the QSVM class from the qiskit.aqua.algorithms library. And what this QSVM basically does is it effectively not only helps you in preparing the quantum data set, but also evaluating the entire quantum model, all of the variational parts and also the optimization of parameters, all of it is being handled by this QSVM class. So if you want to have a look at the documentation, again, I would highly encourage you all to go to qiskit.aqua.algorithms. Under QSVM, it has the entire code of how each thing happens. So what this class actually accepts is the feature map, the training input and the test input. And there we go. There is our QSVM object, which basically stores the entire quantum circuit for moving to a high dimension, processing there, and then moving back to a lower dimension. All right. So to run this entire program, what we need to do is from Qiskit, we are importing basic air, and from basic air, we are obtaining the backend. So in our case, starting with the QASM simulator, because in our paper, what we analyzed was first the classical case, which we have shown you. The second was was running on a quantum simulator, which is the QASM simulator. And the third and final case was that we ran on 2 different architectures, the bow tie and the T architecture of the Yorktown device and the other device available by IBM out there in the United States. All right. So what we do here, I mean, you guys must be aware how to run quantum instance by passing in the backend, the number of shots, and passing in seed simulator, seed transpiler. And finally, we obtain the result by simply typing qsvm.run, and we pass the quantum instance that we have over here. So if you try to analyze the QASM simulator outputs, you will be able to see that we get an accuracy of 60%. It is less, I know that, but it's trying to catch up with the linear kernel that we have in classical systems. So given the point that we have very low coherence time, and given the point that we have very noisy quantum hardware, we are able to show that quantum computing is trying to catch up as much as it can in the NISQ era based on the power, based on its exponential power. So we also did the same thing for the mental health dataset. And you can see that here we obtained better accuracy of 0.7. And if you try to run it on quantum hardware, the accuracy will drop a little more, because this is the simulator, classical simulator, which is doing the job for you with very little noise. But in the quantum computer, as and when the size of the circuit increases, the noise will also increase. Of course, the depth of the circuit is increasing, which means you are reaching the coherence time, which means the noise is also going to increase. So moving back, so the results, these were the results that we actually have. So we'll just be focusing on the train accuracy. For classical SVM, it was around 0.75 with the Gaussian kernel, which we showed. And for the QUASM simulator, you can see it's 0.70, right, for the train, basically train accuracy. And we ran it on the IBM Orens and also was run on the IBM Yorktown devices. Basically, one is a T architecture, basically the arrangement of the qubits that you can have. And the other one is a bow tie architecture. So we ran it on different architectures, and we were able to show that the T architecture performs better than the bow tie architecture. And the accuracy is almost similar to that of the simulator as well. So here is the conclusion from our work. So the first point is that we are looking at something entirely different, a system which uses the principles of physics to actually compute information, to actually give you exponential state space. So it's not at all about the speed up, but it's about looking something entirely differently, right? So another thing is we can expect lots of HQC architectures or hybrid quantum classical architectures to spring up in the future. Of course, there are a lot of applications right now. For example, in quantum chemistry, simulations of really big molecules, people are trying out with almost 50 qubits. That's happening right now, 50 to 100 qubits in different architectures. People are trying out optimization problems, like how do you solve the traffic problem of a big city like Bangalore, right? If you're able to globalize the entire traffic optimization problem, how would you do it? And quantum computers can definitely help us, because this optimization problem is NP complete or even further. It's very complicated. It cannot be solved in polynomial time at all, right? So the final conclusion is that we demonstrated a quantum machine learning architecture which is scalable. Of course, the noise in qubits will decrease as the years go by. Of course, the mathematical models are going to increase. And this scalable model can be used for real-world applications even today. So that's the conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Well, here are some questions I will be reading. How qubits consider in SVM?
Okay, yeah. So we are not considering qubits in support vector machines, but in quantum support vector machines. So basically, as I said, the moment we have to transition to a higher dimension, there's exponential state space available with qubits. Let's take example of any architecture, superconducting architecture, ion trap systems, whatever we have an exponential state space, which can basically map the lower dimensional data to a higher dimensional data. And to process the data in higher dimensions, basically getting a hyperplane to divide the data sets into multiple classes, what you can do is you can calculate it on the quantum computer, which is much, much faster and which is also much more efficient. And then the moment you make classical measurements and optimize the parameters, you're moving to the classical dimension again. So that's where qubits are considered in quantum support vector machines.
The embedding technique.
Yeah.
Here, one more question. Yeah. Is the SVM used for unlabeled data also? No, SVM is actually supervised machine learning technique. So we have to use it with labeled data.
Yeah, there have been approaches for unlabeled data as well. A lot of clustering techniques. There's something known as quantum Boltzmann machines, which people are trying out. So if you try looking up what classical Boltzmann machines do, energy-based models for unlabeled data, then we can also try and transition to quantum Boltzmann machines. So it's still under progress, but we are pretty hopeful that quantum computing can definitely help us with its exponential power and speed up.
Yeah. I think the idea is like to any algorithm that is present in machine learning, we can apply the quantum embedding and get the advantage that we are trying. So whether it be supervised or unsupervised, that is possible. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, Google is spending a lot. IBM, Google, Honeywell, all the tech giants are spending lots and lots of money in this, and they have a goal of 10 years. So in the next 5 to 10 years, quantum computing is going to reach a lot of great heights. Now, why do we say that? It's because the noise is going to decrease and the hardware is going to increase to, let's say right now we have 50 qubits, which are having a lot of noise. We will be able to reach 1 million qubits or even 100,000 to 1 million qubits with very less noise, which can help us in, let's say, quantum chemistry applications or optimization applications. And it's going to make a really huge impact, say after 10 years, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Why specifically did you choose SVM?
Okay, yeah. So we were looking for an algorithm that that can help us in utilizing the exponential state space, and SVM was a very good algorithm, especially if you take the example of the RBF kernel, the radial basis function kernel. So what's happening there? We have data set which has been basically mapped to an exponential state space, right? That was one of the motivators that we looked into before choosing SVM and transitioning into quantum SVM. Of course, there are other algorithms that you can look into, like the variational quantum classifier architecture, which I discussed with you, can be used for several architectures. The other ones, which I told you, right, quantum Boltzmann machines, there are different QUBO problems that can be solved, QUBO optimization problems that can be solved. But yeah, this was a good thing to have a proof of concept and see if quantum computing can really help you in the machine learning problems. So we start off with SVM, and we are definitely on a journey on trying different algorithms.
Yes. Any more questions? There are no more questions in the chat box. Okay, I have to unmute Kavita madam. She wants to ask the question. 1 second, I have to go to the host machine.
Hello.
Madam, you are unmute now. Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead, madam.
My first question is regarding the classical SVM, which you have explained. And there you have told about the C parameter choosing. So that C parameter chosen, does it differ from for different types of data sets?
Actually, yeah, this value of the C parameter, as I told you, we have to decide on trial and error basis. So for a specific application, what C value will be useful, it depends on how your data items are spread across.
Okay. And if you have shown for a 2 class, so if it is for a multi-class, then how to choose a C value?
So, hello, how to choose C value? So that's what C value will, yeah.
Yeah, C value for the multi-class applications.
Yeah, that's what C value will make your classification more optimal. So it is, if it is 1 class or 2 classes or 3 classes, it doesn't, that how you are drawing that hyperplane, that is decided by C value.
Yeah, another way is we can treat C value as a hyperparameter and try to optimize it by setting up another machine learning model internally. That's another interesting thing which people have tried out recently.
I have one more question regarding the quantum SVM. So there you have mentioned about the feature maps and also about the evaluate function in the second module. So where actually this evaluate model comes in the code implementation you have executed?
let me just share my screen.
One second, I will give you the guides. Yes, I think I have given.
No,
No,
I'm unable.
you need to go to host messaging for that.
Or I
Yes,
can just
yes.
speak about it. I can just speak about it.
No, he
I'm
got
sure.
it. I think. Now he got it.
Yeah, no, I got it. Okay, so basically, the result object, right, which we obtain after running this QSVM object, basically after running qsvm.run. So run is a function of QSVM, which will execute the entire circuit multiple number of times for multiple number of epochs. Now, when I say epoch, it's the entire process of moving from the embedding to classical measurement to your optimization of parameters, right? That's an entire epoch. And we have different number of shots as well. So you can see that here we have number of shots as 1024. So shots here is again used for probabilistic measurement in quantum computing to figure out the different states, the finally what outcome we are going to get for a particular state, right? So there's the concept of using shots and there's the concept of using different epochs, and therefore we have the QSVM.run, and this result is being stored in an object, and the object contains information, complete information about the training accuracy, testing accuracy, and that's how we are trying to get basically testing accuracy of 0.6. So yeah, I think your question also was, how are we going to evaluate this model on unseen data, right? So if you want to test the model on unseen data, especially in a quantum computer, we'll have to again map that data to the quantum computer and run it in real time. So basically this entire model has to be rerun, and the evaluation has to happen just after the model has run. So that's one disadvantage at the moment, because again, the coherence time is not very high. And if you want to have multiple evaluations on the fly, then you'll have to train the model multiple number of times. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, in the model, in the model which you have shown in the presentation, there you have shown after measurement, we are taking a classical measurements and we are
Yes.
evaluating it again and again to improve the accuracy.
Yes.
So can you show me that block where it is rerun again and again to improve the accuracy?
Yes, it's actually in this QSVM block. I can actually show you the blocks of QSVM. Let me reshare my entire screen so that I can open up my browser. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm just opening the documentation of the QSVM library from Qiskit. And if you click on the source, it will basically give you the entire code which is being used here, starting from the embedding, moving into the quantum variational circuit, the measurement, and multiple number of epochs that's happening. Okay, so we start off with creating the circuit. So there's the construct circuit. We move ahead, we compute overlaps. Then there's this get kernel matrix for the specific kernel that we're using. Then again, we go ahead with measurement and the measurement basis that is being used. Of course, we are using the measurement basis as a Z basis always. We could use the X basis also, but that would complicate things unnecessarily. Moving ahead. Here you can see that the training is actually happening for multiple number of runs. and again the test function and the predict function. All of this is embedded into the QSVM model itself. So I have given a high level overview of how this entire model works in this slide. We do have another code with us which implements all of this from scratch. Not only the QSVM model, but separate feature maps, quantum model, measurements, and finally cost function and optimization.
Can I please interrupt here?
Yes, please.
The model which you have shown there.
Yes.
To my understanding, actually, what you have implemented, it is just in classification, and the last function, the evaluate const function, is not implemented in the coding. That is what I have understood, and also I have implemented this, and this has done just the measurement. The last evaluate of cost function has not been coded. So the gradient and upgrade parameters, for that you have a one more block where you choose the answers, and then we compute the cost function. So this QSVM here, we have just prepared the quantum data set, and we have just evaluated based on different types of gates we have in the QSVM function. And then we have done the measurement to check the accuracy. So that is what it is done. The last model, the evaluate classical model, is not coded. So for that, we have different type of coding where we choose the different answers, and then we calculate the cost function. And then we update.
To my understanding, there are 4 different epochs that have been implemented here. Basically taking the measurement and then re-updating the parameters 4 different times in the QSVM model.
Actually, in the QSVM, this theta parameter is not taken. Updation is not happening. If you see that complete QSVM function, so the theta updating is not done in this QSVM. So for that,
of course, there are 4 different updates been happening in the QSVM model. I can definitely get back to you on this offline if that is all right.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So there are 4 different updates been happening for the different theta parameters. Thank you.
Yeah, for that you have to code differently, right?
Yeah.
So that implementation is not shown here in the presentation, I hope.
No, not in the code that we have, but in the presentation architecture that I've shown.
Okay. Fine. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah, thank you, Kavita. Here 2 more questions. How important is the choice of kernel, and what are some standard kernel used?
Yeah, so some standard kernels. Would you like to go, ma'am? Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yep. If we talk about standard kernels, there's this Gaussian kernel, then we have the radial basis function kernel. Of course, if we talk about very simple calculations with SVMs which are running on embedded devices, then we use linear kernels. Linear kernels, you can code it up from scratch, or linear kernels are available by different libraries. Of course, by Qiskit and also by sklearn, and all of the different packages which have machine learning, classical machine learning, will have a different set of linear kernels, RBF kernels for moving into exponential state space, and also the Gaussian kernels.
Yes, I think in my slides I had listed what are the different types of kernel. Yeah, I think there are no more questions in chats. Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to show whatever the Jupyter notebook I had explained in the slides. The Jupyter notebook code as well as the data set I have actually put it in the drive link. You can just check out in the drive link the content. My screen is visible?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, sir. Is it visible now?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so this is the Jupyter notebook code just for simple classical SVM classification for that muffin and cupcake data set. So the entire code as well as the
Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt, ma'am. I think you have just shared the Anaconda window. So
yeah. So I just want to show the Jupyter notebook only.
no, ma'am. Notebook is not visible actually. I think you just.
Okay. I'll just check.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. Hello. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am. I think yes. Now it's visible.
Okay, so this is the Jupyter notebook code for that basic classification using SVM. And in that drive link, I have put the code as well as the data set. So you can just have a hands-on. And this is how we are drawing the hyperplane, how we are drawn the margin, and how we have predicted the new data set value, whether it is belongs to particular category. Okay. So I think, yeah, that's it from our side.
Okay, is that done now?
Yes, sir. There are no questions also.
Okay, shall I go ahead or you want something to say?
Here some question is there. Can I ask hardware related questions? Somebody asking.
Please, you can keep sending a mail to them. We'll get back to you on that.
Sure.
We want to take a short break for 10-15 minutes to go for a next session. Officially, all the technical sessions have been over with this. We have one session from our principal at 11:30, which is on 21st century skills through NEP, followed by valedictory and a test. So I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Meenal Moharid for a wonderful presentation on SVM and the quantum SVM part of that. Along with her, Mr. Raghav Rawat and Mr. Syed Fahan, who were there with us in a circuit. And of course, it's very good to know they have started their own venture in a quantum domain. So we wish you all the success for that. And both of you gave very clear insight of how the QSVM can be coded and can be demonstrated. Overall, it's quite interactive session. So thanks for giving the session to all the three of you. So we are very much honored for that. So thank you all. If you want to meet at 11:30 for the next session.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Please do not miss the following session. We have a valedictory also immediately after that. Can you share the can you enable my share